Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast, where you get each week tips, tricks, techniques for starting and growing your legal nurse consulting business. In the podcast that you will hear next or watch next, if you're on our YouTube channel, Legal Nurse Business, Barbara Levin and I chat about a topic that is of intense interest to legal nurse consultants. And that is, how do you get paid? What should you charge? Should you use hourly rates or flat fees? Do you need a retainer? Always. And in what circumstances should you have one? What should you do about raising your rates? Why you need to have a fee agreement that the attorney sees and signs ahead of time. Barbara and I chat about these in this almost hour-long podcast. You want to take notes and be sure to subscribe to the transcripts so that you can receive the transcripts of this program as well as other legal nurse podcasts. Get ready for an exciting and fast-moving session.
So welcome. We are so, thank you, Joanna. We're so happy to have all of you joining us. I can only imagine what was the intriguing factor for this particular session that Pat and I are doing together. Was there one thing that you said, I have to attend this? Was there one reason, one particular part of the topic that is intriguing or you feel is a must need? If you could put that in the chat, we'd love to see it.
And the reminder again, the topic is the hard truth about setting your fees as an LNC. And we will go beyond the topic of setting fees and talk about additional aspects of running your business from a financial perspective.
So everyone's kind of quiet here. Let's see. New LNC. All righty. Just getting started. Well, you got to start somewhere, and we're happy that you're starting here with us. Renia, seems that the subject is not very transparent, so looking for direction. Thank you for sharing that. And Chris, I feel like I'm not charging enough. We're going to talk about that today. And Laura James, almost as long as you two and one of the LNCC pioneers in the industry, anytime I see offerings by you both, I try not to miss it. Still doing our thing. Laura, thank you. Thank you so much. We love having you. And she wants to see how everyone's doing. Somebody else is new, wants to set up her business, new in learning. And let's see, Sheila said, personal injury attorney asked me, how much is my rate? I'm in Houston. And another one said, anytime she gets to hear us, she loves to sign up. So we are so delighted to have a following that when they see our names, people want to join at whatever the topic is. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate you following us. So here we are, the hard truth about setting your LNC, your fees as an LNC. So welcome, everyone. Today, we're tackling a major challenge for new legal nurse consultants, how to set your fees and get paid what you're worth. And if you're struggling to figure out what to charge, afraid you might not be pricing yourself correctly, perhaps you feel that you're too high or you're too low or worried about getting paid on time, this conversation is for you. Would you like to get paid on time every time? Of course we would. Well, Pat Iyer has developed her skills collecting from attorneys for over 30 years that she ran her full-time legal nurse consulting business, very successful company. Her company had sales of over $1 million a year for the last 5 years that she ran that company. For a business owner who says, numbers are not my friends, she developed strategies that will help you in your business so you can get paid what you're worth. Joining us today is our wonderful leader, Pat Iyer, and she's the highly experienced legal nurse consultant and business coach who has helped countless legal nurse consultants build successful practices. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Barbara. Glad to be here.
Let's start with the biggest mistake that so many LNCs charge way too little. Why is that such a problem?
It's a dilemma because when you quote a low fee to an attorney, you're broadcasting either that you're undervaluing your services or that you're inexperienced or both. Attorneys do ask around. Attorneys are aware of going rates for legal nurse consultants. And when they hear a number that's quite at the far end of the spectrum, it raises their eyebrows. There are attorneys called economic buyers who value legal nurse consultants purely on how much they cost per hour. How much are they charging per hour? But the dilemma for those attorneys is that sometimes that truism of you get what you pay for is indeed in place. The inexperienced person who charges a low fee may not be able to provide that attorney with the value that the attorney is looking for. And I've learned this the hard way, when you set your fee low to begin with, then it's very difficult to raise it to what would be an appropriate level. I finished working as an employee in a hospital in 1987. And then I decided to go out on my own and do consulting and teaching and working with attorneys as an expert witness. I went back to my employer and said, I will consult with you on nursing quality assurance matters. And I quoted them $40 an hour in 1987, which was really low for that time frame. And then I realized, hey, Pat, this was a really low rate. So I went back to them and said, I'm planning to increase my rates. And they said, oh, no, we like the rates just the way they are. I was too inexperienced to know how to react to that. When you set your rates low to begin with as a new legal nurse consultant, then you want to increase your rates to make it a more appropriate level. You can't go from something low to something appropriate in one big jump. You may have to increase your rates incrementally, perhaps every year to 2 years to catch up. And while we're talking about rate increases, one of the things that I get asked often is, well, what happens for those attorneys? I started working with them, let's say at $125 an hour, picking a number out of the air. Then I want to increase my rates. How much can I increase them? Generally not more than about $25 or $30 per hour every year or two. So you can see if you started off at below $100 an hour and you wanted to get up to 150, for example, you can't go from 75 to 150 without surprising your clients and potentially losing some of your clients. That's why if you start too low, it's harder to catch up. So that's one of the big issues, Barbara, is that you're working very hard. You're not making enough money to cover your expenses. And then you sit there as a new LNC and say, why am I doing this? I could be working in the hospital or in the nursing home and being paid more per hour than I'm charging the attorney. This doesn't feel like a fair trade. Staff nurse rates have certainly gone up since the pandemic. We used to say in legal nurse consulting, you should charge 3 to 4 times per hour as you would get as a staff nurse working in your area. Now that number might be double. In some cases, it might not even be double, depending upon what nurses are being paid to work clinically as staff nurses. Now, that's one of the dilemmas. When you tie up your time with low income payment, with low fees, it prevents you from spending your time marketing, going out to get new business and getting that new business at an appropriate level for your experience as an LNC, your educational background, and your location.
That is such valuable information. Now, many legal nurse consultants are afraid to charge what they're worth. Why do you think that is?
Well, part of it is a fear factor. Part of it is not knowing what you should be charging. Part of it is confidence. This is a new world. When you walk into a hospital or a nursing home or any other setting to apply for a job, they don't say to you, what do you expect to be paid per hour? You're on a table somewhere as a nurse with X amount of experience, new employee, you're going to be coming in at this rate. There's very little, if any, negotiation. This is the rate that you're going to be paid. These are the benefits that you're going to get. If you're full-time, if you're part-time, maybe no benefits. When you're in business, it's up to you to set your rate and then to say it with confidence and clarity and without sounding apologetic, which is sometimes what particularly new LNCs feel when they say their rate. There was a man who I heard talk about this who said that he always carried a cigar with him. And as soon as somebody would say to him, what's your rate? He would say it and he would stick the cigar in his mouth unlit. And one day his friend said, like, I've never seen you smoke cigars. Why do you carry them? And he says, I put it in my mouth to prevent me from immediately wavering on my fee or apologizing or lowering it. I shove it in my mouth so I won't say another word.
That's a great trick. Very good. I also think that LNC should stand in front of a mirror and practice and either film yourself or observe yourself in the mirror, but pay close attention to your body language.
And when somebody says to you, what do you charge? You have a tendency to immediately go to your hourly rate, but you might not know enough about the case to quote a fee. They might say to you, what do you charge per hour? The next logical question is, well, tell me about the case and what you're looking for. Because often the next question after what you charge per hour is, well, how long do you think this is going to take? And that's an even tougher question because the attorney's got a computer with several PDF files on it, and each of those might have 1,000 to 1,500 pages of records. When we saw records in physical form 10, 15 years ago, the attorney could say, well, I've got about, 7 inches of records. But looking at files on a computer is not as easy to determine how long those records are going to be. I would make a joke of it, and I say to the attorney, well, my crystal ball isn't working this morning. Let's talk about how much you have in the way of medical records. What's the focus of your case? If an incident occurred in a hospital, and then there were subsequent rehab records and nursing home records, they might not be important if you're looking at the evaluation for liability that happened in the nursing home. So there might be a lot of records, but what you need to look at is a very narrow piece of those records.
So that leads me to my next question, in that there's some legal nurse consultants that are not sure whether they should charge hourly, if they should use flat fees. Do they set up retainers? If you could explain that to everyone, how to break that down.
Sure. Hourly rates are best when you're working on a case. You're working on a chronology or screening a case for merit or doing a medical summary or doing some research. Yes, there is a learning curve in the beginning, and that's tricky because you might spend more time in the beginning because you want to make sure you're not missing anything. And you may realize that you can't charge for all those hours, or you're concerned that you won't get paid for all those hours. We talk about a learning curve, but we can't really define a learning curve equals X number of hours because that's so individual. A flat fee may work well if somebody comes to you and says, I'd like you to find an expert witness for me. I'd like you to find a cardiovascular surgeon. You have a colleague who you've worked with in the past who's willing to do expert work. You don't have to do any extensive searching for that person. You might say, I have a flat fee of $1,000 to locate the expert witness, and then the expert bills the attorney directly. When you have a large volume of experts willing to work for you, and you don't have to do a lot of work to find them, a flat fee for finding an expert is perfect. However, a flat fee on the other end works against you if it's a difficult to find expert. For example, a neurosurgeon, a highly qualified neurosurgeon. They are challenging to find. Many of them don't do expert work. Many of them don't want to do plaintiff expert work. Some of them are so prominent that nobody wants to go against them. There are certain specialties where it's challenging. So the flat fee works well when you don't have to put a lot of effort into doing a search for an expert who's not going to let you bill for their services. But it doesn't work well for other kinds of cases. It doesn't work well for screening a case for merit, for example, where you might have a very complex case with a lot of defendants that you have to look at if you're helping a plaintiff attorney. When you can limit the scope of the assignment and you know that you can accomplish it quickly, a flat fee helps to balance some of those occasions when your flat fee isn't going to cover all of the time that you need. And then retainers, you asked me about, Barbara.
Yes.
Oh, is that an important topic that gets people in trouble all of the time? Legal nurse consultants. The new LNC who is so excited about getting a case may not ask for a retainer or may not even think in terms of a retainer. And then the LNC does the work, and then the attorney takes their time paying the bill. And the LNC is waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to get paid. This is particularly a problem with two groups of attorneys. One of them are defense attorneys who are waiting for the carrier to pay bills. The carrier may say, we're not paying retainers. Forget it. We'll just pay the invoice when it gets into our billing cycle. The other group of people who struggle with retainers are solo practitioners or law firms where there's maybe a couple of attorneys and cash flow is like a roller coaster. They're waiting for money from the insurance carrier for the case they settled so that then they can pay the bills. They can pay to keep the lights on. They're challenging to get payment from also. My recommendation on retainers is to always ask for them from every plaintiff firm until you have a very strong relationship with a firm. They pay their bills quickly. They pay them on time. You never have to struggle with them. Those people, you might want to give them the benefit of the doubt and not ask for a retainer. But that's a rare, rare exception. For plaintiff firms, you want at least 10 hours of time if it's a significant case. And by that, I mean, maybe the attorney says, I've got an emergency department record. Could you summarize that for me? That might amount to no more than 20 or 30 pages. 10 hours would be too much for that. Maybe you'd ask for half of that. If it's a nursing home record, you're going to have a lot of records, or a hospital record, you're going to have a huge number of records. So that 10 hours is a reasonable number. And you can always adjust it if you need to. And then the replenishing retainer concept is something that I find many LNCs don't do and are not familiar with. which means that once you've gone through most of that initial 10-hour retainer and you're still looking at a large number of records, you ask for another 10-hour retainer. You don't wait until you use up all the 10. You ask for it at about 7.5, 8 hours, giving them enough time to prepare the check, get it to you, or to get you payment through Zelle or a credit card if you accept credit cards. That way you are spending less time chasing people for money. I had a bookkeeper who worked for me as a full-time employee who spent 3 days a week contacting attorneys and invoicing, contacting attorneys asking for payment of invoices. When we went to the replenishing retainer plan, she spent 1 day a week making phone calls and following up. So it's a huge investment of attention, but it's also, if you don't do retainers or replenishing retainers, you spend a lot of time chasing attorneys, and that gets very uncomfortable.
Such important information to share. Just going along with this, I know there was a quick little question from someone: a retainer for any and all work, hourly, merit review, expert witness? Yes.
Yes.
Make sure you get that retainer if it's a merit review, if it's your work as an expert witness. Absolutely.
Now, you may ask a defense attorney for a retainer and be prepared to hear no, but don't assume that you cannot get a retainer from a defense firm, because some insurance carriers will pay them. And I learned this from experience. I made an assumption I could never get them. And then one day I thought, if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. And that applies to many things in life. So why not ask the defense firm? And I found out that a percentage of them would give retainers.
Thank you. I know in our line of work as legal nurse consultants, sometimes people are leaving money on the table. And so there's many LNCs who are only charging for what they spend time on, directly reviewing medical records, but they forget about all their other work involved. And what's the danger of that?
Well, you could end up spending a fair amount of time on phone calls with attorneys, for example. If you have a 15-minute increment billing for your business, if you spend half an hour on the phone with the attorney, that's billable time. I personally don't bill for short calls, meaning 5-6 minutes, transactional type calls. How are you doing with your report? We have a deadline. How are things progressing? But when you have more involved, longer calls with attorneys, that becomes billable time. I had an attorney once who questioned me because I invoiced him for 75 minutes. No, I'm sorry, 3/4 of an hour, 0.75 hours. And he said, I looked at my phone bill and we were on the phone for only 20 minutes. And I said, let me check my records and then I'll respond to you. So I called him back and I said, yes, we were on the phone for 20 minutes, but I spent time getting ready for the call, reviewing the case, refreshing my memory, and being able to answer the questions that I knew you would have about the case. So it was from start to finish 45 minutes or 0.75 hours. And then he backed off and he never questioned me again about an invoice. Having very good billing records is critical so that you can back up your assertions. And, Barbara, as we were talking about retainers before, I wanted to bring up something that you and I have been talking about, and we have been seeing that there's some confusion in the marketplace about retainers. The retainer comes from the attorney's pocket for a specific case. If you're working on the Wilson case, The attorney representing Wilson is going to be providing you with a retainer. And let's say that's a screening for merit. You go through all the records, you determine the case does not have merit, and you decide, I can't support the attorney's position. You talk to the attorney says, I don't need anything else. You still have 3 hours left from that initial 10. What do you do with those 3 hours? You want to comment on that, Barbara?
Actually, I'd like to see people put in the chat, what do you do with the 3 hours that are left out of that retainer? I'd like to see what their thoughts are before we comment on it. This has been a very active topic that Pat and I have been seeing in a variety of legal nurse circles. So many have said refund. One suggested crediting towards the next case. So really the answer is refunding that money to the attorney. It is not our money. We did the work. We were paid for the work. Now we must return the remainder. And we cannot use that remainder of the money towards another case, because in the attorney office, they have separate financial files for each and every case. So you can't take the money that was given to you to review for merit on Mr. A, and let's say there were 3 hours left. You can't use that to entice the attorney to come back and then use it towards the next case of client B in his office. You can't do that. It must remain within the same clients. They keep specific financial records in the attorney office so that they know how much money has been expended on each of their cases. And so you must refund the money. It's what you have to do aside from your moral and ethical obligations, because you didn't earn that additional money. And there have been interesting discussions on other legal nurse gatherings, I guess I could say, on the internet, that many have thought that they could keep it as a bonus for themselves. And it was just whatever, a little bit amount of money, whatever people's thoughts are. It's wrong, and we must return the money. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, Pat, because we want to make sure that we are sending a unified, clear message of what is the right thing to do. And many of you will find yourselves in a position that you have some retainer money back. When your attorney client receives the remainder of the money, he's going to be so excited that you did the right thing, that he or she will call you again, knowing that, wow, we got the money back. We can put it back into our client's fund. Maybe we're looking at other avenues with that case, whatever it is. Thank you.
What I know about you is that most likely you're an experienced nurse. You know how to handle complex cases, demanding patients, and a high-pressure environment. But when it comes to building your legal nurse consulting business, everything is not as clear. It's a whole different story. You've invested time and money in an LNC program, and you thought attorneys would be eager to work with you. You expected your phone to ring and for people to go to your website. And instead, it's silence. You've sent emails, you've made phone calls, you've even dusted off your resume and tried to put yourself out there. And instead, you're not getting anything. But you're surrounded with LNCs who seem to have figured it out. And you wonder, am I cut out for this? What am I missing? How can I bring in attorneys and stand out in a crowded field? The truth is that nothing in nursing prepared you for running a business. It didn't prepare you for reading spreadsheets or marketing or setting your fees or handling attorney inquiries with confidence. Without a clear plan, your LNC business can feel impossible. And the longer you go without getting clients, the more that quiet voice creeps in that says, maybe this was just a phase that I needed to go through. Maybe this isn't going to work. There is a better way. And that is a course that I am offering called How to Start and Grow Your Legal Nurse Consulting Business. This is a 5-part course designed to give you the steps that you need to take you through what it means to build a profitable business. It gives you the tools and the strategies and the confidence to finally get some traction. In this 5-session course, we start off with defining your services, who your ideal client is, and your business structure, so that you can confidently be clear on who you want to work with, who you want to serve. We then move on in session 2 about setting your fees with confidence. It can be tricky to prepare a fee agreement and to work on a coherent plan for getting paid on time, every time. In session 3, we'll focus on writing professional reports and having a sample report that you can show to an attorney who says, show me an example of what you've done. Our 4th session will focus on marketing, how you can attract attorneys to you without cold calling, without guesswork. Content marketing, networking, referrals, and presentations are all effective ways to get attention for your LNC services. And then we'll wrap up by focusing on what will happen when an attorney says, hey, could you find me a neurosurgeon, or I need an OR nurse. Can you find me an expert witness? That's one of the most commonly requested services, particularly for medical malpractice cases. And I'll take you through that process so that you'll know what to do when you get that kind of request. You can join us by going to this link, lnc.tips/start. That will take you to the registration page for the course so that you can move ahead with your business and feel the confidence that you want and have the strategies that you need in order to grow your LNC business. Go to lnc.tips/start. And to be very clear, we're talking about when you are finished with a case. At the end, if you find that case has merit, for example, or you're working on a chronology and then the attorney says, I want you to be able to compare deposition testimony for me or help me prepare for a deposition. You can keep that unused portion in a separate bank account. You should put retainer money in a separate bank account from your checking. Like the old thing that we used to call the savings, which now gives you like 14 cents a year. That savings account is your retainer account, and you keep it there until the very end, and then the case is resolved. You still have money left over. That's when you return it. You can carry that unused portion throughout the lifetime of the case and apply it to additional work, but at the end, you return it. Many attorneys, as Barbara said, are surprised and grateful because they work with people who don't return those unused portions of retainers. Physicians have a reputation, as an example. Not all physicians, but some say, oh, more for me. We might be looking at money that the plaintiff has put up or the attorney has put up. We don't know where that money came from. All we know is that it doesn't belong to us if we didn't use it. And to your point, Barbara, attorneys are scrutinized about their honesty in using client funds. I'm sure you have followed the story of Alex Murdaugh in South Carolina, who's currently in prison for misusing client funds, in addition to killing his wife and his son. But he was stealing money from plaintiffs and not giving them their share. And he was stealing money from the law firm. Several millions of dollars he put in his own pocket instead of that money going to the right person. I know an attorney who got disbarred, who I knew actually quite well, because he got in trouble for not putting money into a trust account. The trust account bounced. The banks are required to report to the Bar Association when a trust account has insufficient funds and the attorney has written a check on it and the check is no good. Well, he claimed that his wife was dying of cancer and he wasn't paying attention. It didn't help him. He still ended up losing his law license because of the concerns of not handling client funds appropriately. And I know a couple of other attorneys who lost their license to practice law for the same reason. There's a great deal of scrutiny on how well attorneys handle their clients' accounts and big consequences for making mistakes.
For sure. So in summary on that topic, if you've received a retainer, you have not used all of the retainer and your work is complete, perhaps you didn't find merit with the case, perhaps it was a quicker review than what was needed. And if you are all done with that case, yes, you return the remainder of the retainer at that time. If, let's say, for example, you're an expert on the case and it took you fewer hours than what you received the retainer for, and you are on board to support the case, whether you're the plaintiff expert or the defense expert, you will continue to hold on to that, the remaining retainer, and bill against that for additional work that you will have on the case. And some of those items could be reviewing additional medical records, reviewing depositions, perhaps working with the attorney and developing deposition questions for opposing experts or other roles there. And as Pat mentioned about replenishing retainers, that once that is exhausted, or close to being exhausted, you would ask for a replenishing retainer so that you're keeping ahead of your billing for that. So a very important topic, and I'm glad I'm seeing that we got some nice comments thanking us for the clarification. We want to make sure that we share our knowledge and expertise with you. We've been in this business for decades, and we've seen quite a lot. So we want you to learn from the best and hear so much more from us. So with that said, some legal nurses, they are thinking that if they charge less, that they're actually going to get more business. Does that work?
We talked about this a little bit in the beginning, that you're broadcasting inexperience by charging lower rates. And the other disadvantage is that you are attracting the wrong kinds of clients who are going to say, oh, well, if she's charging this, which in their mind is already too high, they're going to see if they can lower your fees. I met a physical therapist in Manhattan who was exhibiting at a conference, and we were both in Manhattan at this attorney conference. And I have a vivid memory of walking down the sidewalk with him in Manhattan, and he would say, Pat, when attorneys ask me about my fees, and then they say, oh, that's too high, I can't pay that. He says, what I tell him is, my fees are my fees are my fees. You don't want to work with me? Don't. The 4-letter word that applies to this is next. There will be attorneys who will come to you trying to negotiate, making you uncomfortable. They are negotiators as a living. They know how to challenge people. The defense attorneys try to bring the numbers down. The plaintiff attorneys try to bring the value of the settlement up. That's what they do for a living. Your fees are not negotiable. You don't want to have a fee that is X for this attorney and Y for another attorney and Z for another. And then when it's time for you to create your invoices for working on a case, you've got 3 different rates. you're going to confuse yourself, you're going to confuse your clients, and your clients are going to talk. Hey, Stephanie, did you know that Barbara's working for me and she's only charging X? And is that what you're paying? You don't want your clients behind your back comparing notes and hearing different numbers. So it should be a uniform fee. And when you raise your rates, you should raise your rates uniformly for everybody, not have older clients and older cases at one rate and newer clients with newer cases at a different rate. Again, confusion, people talking behind your back.
And having said that, as all of you can hear, Pat is certainly a master coach, and she has been published internationally, articles and books, and she has a very successful podcast. She mentors and coaches legal nurses just like you. And some of them are here joining us today all over the United States. And she has an upcoming class that I think you want to talk about.
Well, we are going to cover a lot of the topics in much more depth than we spoke about today. We'll take a minute to share that before we answer more questions. I have a web page that describes the course that's coming up. And let me load that. Let me stop sharing and load that. And we also wanted your thoughts about additional topics that are of interest to you, as we are looking forward to doing some LNC Power Series in the month of April and May. We've got a little poll to ask you to share your thoughts on. And while I'm loading the page, I'll see if I can also answer a question, load a page, think and talk at the same time. There was a question in the chat about whether we use written fee schedules. And yes, I strongly recommend that you have a written fee schedule that does more than say your hourly rate, but specifies when you expect to be paid, how much of a retainer you get, when you ask your clients to replenish the retainer. What happens if they don't pay the invoice on time? Is there an interest penalty? What happens if you have to take them to a collection agency and you're going to add additional fees onto what they owe? If you provide expert witnesses, or if you're an expert witness, you want to cover things like, when is your testifying fee due? What is the cancellation fee? How many days in advance before the scheduled event would that cancellation fee go into effect?
And on that fee schedule, you should identify and list out some of the things that you do as a legal nurse consultant. So talk about your business. How can you help the attorney on there?
Excellent point. Sometimes attorneys come to you with one perspective. Oh, I know that Laura does chronologies. Well, I didn't know that Laura also found expert witnesses. And I didn't know that she also did research on medical issues. They can have a very narrow perspective. And when you spell out your services on your fee agreement, you're showing them the broader range of what you can do. This is the course that we're starting on April 8th. And it is specifically designed for people who are in the early stages of their business. They're focused on starting or growing their business. We are going to be covering the content in this topic to help people understand the foundational principles that help your business become strong and attractive. We're meeting once a week for 5 weeks, beginning with what type of legal nurse consulting services should you offer? What is the best match for you based on your background? What types of cases are most plentiful out there? And then we'll spend a concentrated session on fees, on collection issues, on structuring your fee schedule. I'll share with you a fee schedule and a fee agreement that has stood the test of time and has withstood the attempts of attorneys to try to knock it down. It's airtight. Many attorneys ask new LNCs, do you have a sample report? If you've never done a case, you don't have a sample report. My report writing mastery course is my most popular course that I have been teaching now for about 6 years. We're not going to go into tremendous depth in 1 hour. We're going to give you the opportunity to create a sample report, a specific type of report that you can use when you are marketing to attorneys. So you can say, here's an example of what I have done. That's the third session. And then the fourth session, we will concentrate on marketing, on approaching people, on attracting people. Cold calling is tough and rarely works. We'll focus on more effective ways to be able to bring attorneys to you. And then one of the early services that legal nurse consultants are asked is, how do I find expert witnesses? How do I make sure that they're qualified? That's one of the most common requests that attorneys give legal nurse consultants is, find me a doctor or find me a nurse. We'll go through that process and show you how you do that. There'll be a bonus session on handling attorney inquiries that will enable you to know how to handle those initial phone calls that you get from attorneys. We'll share with you fee agreements and sample reports so that you can see examples of what I'm talking about. And you'll get some assignments to do at the end of each session to make sure that you can apply what you're learning. I will give you feedback on each of those assignments and let you know how you did. And this program is focused on helping you get cases regularly, not have to deal with attorneys trying to negotiate your fee down, giving you the exposure in your area so that attorneys are drawn to you, and that you can work comfortably as a legal nurse consultant, making more than you did at the bedside. Let's focus on the benefits of this. If you're building your LNC business and want help, if you want to learn from an experienced legal nurse consultant, I teach the course based on my 35 years of working with attorneys, and you're drawn to the impact and the income and the freedom that comes along with being an entrepreneur. This is for people who are committed to their business, and you need the right guidance. We are enrolling people now for the course starting on April 5th. It will be at 8 p.m. Eastern once a week. Those are Tuesday nights. And it is available now for a single pay of $897 or 2 payments of $500 every 30 days. Let me put this link in the chat, Barbara, and then we will go back to answering our questions and make sure that we have covered people's questions. And we also want to make sure we run that poll before we close, because we're interested in what your questions are related to analyzing medical records.
So again, this course will begin April 8th. It's April 8, 15, 22, 29, and then May 6th. And it's one that you really can't miss. You will learn so much from someone who is internationally recognized. I mean, Pat has been one of the, most iconic legal nurses, truly, in the world. And she has followers from all over the world. Her work at the American Association of Legal Nurse Consultants as the national president, she's done so much for the field. That's where she and I met. And I had become part of the board of directors and eventually the president of LNC as well. And together we helped move the association to becoming a recognized nursing specialty under the American Board of Nursing Specialties. And we have the LNCC, which is the Legal Nurse Consultant Certification exam. Of course, just like with any nursing specialty, you have to work within the field in order to take your certification exam. And to start in this field, of course, you do not need to be certified when you start. So we're happy to have everyone here, and I encourage you to join Pat's class.
You know, before we start with the next question, let me ask the poll questions and start this. Barbara and I on June 5th are going to do a program that will be an all-day workshop in which we'll take a set of medical records and work through the best practices in terms of analyzing a case. We're going to do a couple of power sessions leading up to that workshop, and we want to make sure that we're providing you with the education that you're looking for the specific topic of analyzing a medical record. You've got 5 choices on the screen. Please choose which of those topics is of highest interest to you. And you can click on that. You get one choice. So it's not a multiple choice. And I'm seeing people are voting now, Barbara, and when everyone has voted or we've got the majority of people voted, then we'll look to see which are the topics that are most interesting. We'll have a chance to do a program in April and a program in May, so we'll pick the 2 top choices.
And we appreciate you joining in on this because every voice matters.
All right, we've got about half of the people who have voted so far. I'm also going to check the chat while we're doing that to make sure that we've covered questions.
One of the questions for the program, are there video recordings if you can't make every session? And yes, you did respond that every session will be recorded. So certainly we understand if you are working that day or if you're out of town on a vacation, yes, every session will be recorded. So you won't miss anything.
I love Stephanie's comment about how she shocked the opposing attorney by giving him a refund for the unused portion of the deposition hours. Great job, Stephanie. And you know, that attorney was probably sitting there thinking, boy, you know, I bet you I've got a case for Stephanie. I'm going to keep her in mind.
I bet. I think they're all in.
All right. Well, it looks, let's end the poll and share the results.
Mm-hmm.
And what I am seeing is that analyzing documentation for deviations and the role of the LNC in presenting findings of liability are the highest requested topics. So thank you for that.
Yes. And then somebody did write in the chat, methods to keep track of billable time. Great.
All right. Perfect, Barbara. And we'll be having this program transcribed, so we'll be able to go back to those 2 top results and work on getting those built into our LNC Power Series.
Now, our next question has to do with clear fee agreements. And I know that we touched upon this a little bit. What happens if a legal nurse consultant doesn't have the proper fee agreement in place?
You risk not getting paid, first of all. The attorney will look for the latitude of delaying payment. There was a question in the chat about late fees, which certainly is part of having a clear fee agreement. And how do you decide on late fees? And the answer, Denise, is that there's all kinds of variations in late fees. Some people charge an extra $50 or $100 per hour. Some people double their hourly rate. There is no uniformity. When I started charging late fees, I brought an extra $100,000 to $200,000 a year into my business because there were a lot of attorneys who were last minute people, or there were developments in the case that required a sudden need for a report to be finished faster than originally planned. I defined late fees as you send me a case and you want the answer within 3 weeks. You want the answer meaning a report done or a screening or a chronology. If you want it done within 3 weeks, 21 days, that became a late fee. Some attorneys would say, well, what if I don't want it until day 22? I said, well, then there's no late fee. That's one example of when you could apply late fees, is your definition of what's going to cause you to have to put aside other things that you're doing and get something done in a short time frame. The other time late fees come in is, Barbara, we're taking your deposition tomorrow. We just realized we didn't send you 7 depositions. We're going to send those to you right now by email. When you have to turn something around on a pre-existing case within a 5-day period, that's also a rush fee. And you can choose that time frame for yourself, whatever makes sense. In between times, your rate goes back to its normal level. It's not that you charge a rush fee throughout the case because you invoke it in the beginning or right before some type of a milestone where the attorney hadn't thought through what needed to be done, or realized that the staff didn't send Barbara those 7 depositions, which has happened to her more than one time, I would acknowledge. And Barbara is smiling because she has indeed run into this, and it's the bane of her existence. It's also a rush fee. So you decide, Denise, what you think is fair, and then you impose it. If you have an attorney who's giving you a ton of work, you might choose not to charge a rush fee as a goodwill gesture to build that relationship with the attorney. That's your discretion. No one will ever complain to you, oh, Denise, you didn't charge me a rush fee. How I came across the idea was one day an attorney said to me, Pat, if you have to charge me more in order for you to get that report done by that specific date, I will understand. And what I heard him say was, Pat, I want you to charge me an extra fee because it's so important to me that you meet that deadline for me based on what I need to do with the case. So when my clients told me, in effect, charge me a rush fee, I realized that I should have been doing it all along. If you start your business, if you're a new LNC, building in rush fees into your fee agreement, you will thank yourself.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the time here and I'm wondering if maybe we should take, we had some additional content to share with you, but this topic seems to be so popular that perhaps we should do a part 2 of this at some time in the future and maybe address some of the questions that people are putting in the chat. So if you have a last minute question, we'd love to address that for you at this time.
And I'm also looking at the chat to see if there's anything that we didn't cover.
And people are excited about a part 2. And if there is a question that you want in the part 2, please list it here. If there's a question that you have that you'd like us to answer right now, we are all ears right this moment. Everyone.
Well, I see Denise asked a question. This is a different Denise than the person who asked about late fees. Would you be able to review the difference LNC services and rank the fees from lowest to highest? There's a broad way to answer that, Denise, which is behind the scenes consulting is typically charged at an hourly rate. And you wouldn't typically charge a chronology at a different rate than a research of medical review literature at a different rate than preparing deposition questions or summarizing depositions, your hourly rate as a behind-the-scenes LNC would be consistent. If you're an expert witness, you're charging at the next level above at a higher rate than behind the scenes. Some experts charge a lower fee for reviewing records and writing a report, and a higher fee for going to a deposition or courthouse to testify. Other expert witnesses charge all their services at the same consistent rate. That becomes a matter of individual preference. My philosophy on this was to charge at a consistent hourly rate so that I could use that as a marketing advantage to say to the attorney, the expert witness rate is X, and we don't charge a higher rate when the expert goes to testify. Oh, that's very reasonable, Pat. That sounds great. So I got more mileage by making it a consistent rate because I knew that only 5% of the cases would end up in a courthouse. A larger percentage will end up in deposition.
We certainly appreciate all of you joining us here today. And we look forward to having you join us with our future power sessions and encourage you to sign up for how to start and grow your legal nurse consultant business, the 5-week course that Pat is teaching.
Thank you so much for the rest of you who have joined us for this program. We would love for you to continue to sign up for LNC Power Series, and then also to take advantage of the opportunity to build your business with the 5-week course coming up that I'll begin on April 8th. And yes, we will talk, Barbara and I will talk about a part 2 on fees and dealing with some of these challenges when it comes to collecting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, you'll have an opportunity to hear an interview in which 2 experienced legal nurse consultants ask me questions about the mistakes that legal nurse consultants commonly make when they start their business. We're going to be talking about a far-ranging set of concepts and giving you guidance and advice on specific issues of getting started as a legal nurse consultant. We'll cover things like broadcasting and setting and quoting your fees, about who's your ideal client and what type of services do you want to provide. What are some important things to have in your fee agreement that will help prevent trouble? And I'll share with you some of the things that I have learned along the way so that you don't have to make those same mistakes. I did a lot in my business, and I did some things, but boy, I wish I could have done over. Coming up next on Legal Nurse Podcast, the common mistakes that LNCs make.